You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Hello everyone and welcome to Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. And in these podcasts I'm taking a deep dive into interesting conversations that fundamentally aim to shift perspectives and ignite change. So the last couple of podcasts have been on aging in men, and in particular the last one was on the physical stuff that we need to be aware of and that we need to take into account as we get older. And so I raised some interesting questions about that. In today's podcast I want to discuss an intriguing concept, and that is our beliefs and attitudes about aging and how the aging how aging affects us in this process, because it is a process. One of the things I posed was, at what point do we talk about developing, and at what point am I talking about aging? Now, what if I told you that adopting a positive mindset about aging might just lead to a longer life and a healthier and more fulfilling one? Well, let's dig into this absolutely fascinating topic. And as you know, a large amount of what we experience is simply about our thinking. So the first part in this podcast that I want to cover is the power of perception. And that is, as a society, we tend to view aging as a period of decline, overlooking the beauty and the grace, the wisdom and the life stories that come with age. But what if we could change this perception? Now, studies suggest that our attitudes towards aging can directly and greatly affect our overall experience of it. For instance, those who have a positive outlook on aging tend to be more socially engaged, healthier, and therefore able to maintain cognitive sharpness for longer periods of time. So what are the research findings in this particular area? So let me examine a couple of scientific studies that have been done, and what's the evidence coming back on this? So can we really, in other words, back up this claim? Now, one landmark study from Yale revealed that older individuals who held a positive self-perception of aging on average outlived those with less positive self-perceptions by an astounding 7.5 years. This result stood strong even when the variables such as socioeconomic status, loneliness, and functional health were considered. So that's a pretty big issue. Now let's go on. So how in fact does mindset impact on behaviour? So how does a simple mindset shift profoundly impact our health? Now fundamentally it's through our actions. Believing in a vibrant life in our later years motivates us to take actions that align with this belief. Eating healthily, exercising regularly, resting adequately, and maintaining our mental health, our mental well-being. Now, all of you who've been following my podcast will recognise in this that I talk about self-awareness, flexibility, adaptability, and resilience. And this is a constant. This is consistent right through our lives. If we can foster this, we're going to get a bigger bang for our buck. Now, one of the things that we've got to take into account is how do I change my mindset? Well, in a way, it's simple. Change the way that you think. And so all of you, from previous podcasts know that I promote, encouraging some stoic thinking or practicing Zen or going into therapy like REBT or ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and essentially to make ourselves reflect and find points where we are rigid and where we really do need to sharpen it up. Changing your mindset is a gradual process that starts with debunking negative stereotypes about aging. We need to celebrate the experience that comes with age. Let's draw some inspiration from older role models who lead active and enriching lives. Also, a growth mindset is key. No matter what your age, we can continue to learn, grow, and adapt. So at this point, let me come to a very particular issue, and that is our self-imposed attitudes towards aging. So I'm going to pull that together a bit more and more sharply into focus. So what am I really talking about at this point? Well, the fundamental issue that I face with a lot of people is their self-directed ageism. So not only are we copying it from the community and a whole bunch of social stereotypes, but because we've absorbed them, we're actually doing it to ourselves. So what do I mean by self-directed ageism? Well, they're internalized negative stereotypes and beliefs about aging. I can't do this anymore because I'm old, or, I don't learn well, or I don't remember things as well, or, I'm not very good with digital things. I never ever learned really how to use them. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Now, the problem with these self-directed ageisms is that they affect our mental health. They affect our self-esteem, and most of all, they affect our quality of life. I don't have the energy anymore that I used to. I'm not strong enough. All sorts of things. Now, some of those attitudes actually might be rooted in some reality. Yes, you may not have the same stamina, agility, flexibility, and so on, but believe me, at my age, I'm continuing to learn how to work with it. Not against it, but work with it. So these social narratives and stereotypes are really at the core of this self-directed ageism. Once I'm over 55, I'm over the hill. All right, well, really, are you? So let me just pull into focus what that actually then means in terms of mental health. The more negative, the more pessimistic you are about aging, the more vulnerable you're going to be to depression, anxiety, and feelings of worthlessness. And this is particularly relevant for us as men because a large amount of our self-esteem and feelings of worthwhileness come from our position in society, i.e., the jobs that we do, or we're a father, a husband, all these things roll into one, constitute in our minds who and what we're about. But we need something stronger than that. So if I unpack, for example, depression, essentially there's the cognitive triad. Negative perception of self, negative perception of the world and others in it, and a negative perception of the future. So you can see where I'm going with this. If I've got a really negative attitude about aging and I'm pessimistic about the future and I'm definitely negative and irrationally negative about myself and my place within society, what else am I going to experience other than anger? And I'm more likely going to internalize that. And I'm also going to let others experience some of that anger. So I'm going to be a grumpy old man, which again doesn't help my sense of connection with others, my sense of having a place. And even if I don't have my Golden Boss business card anymore, still having a sense of purpose and meaning and worthwhileness. So what we've got to do is we've got to go out and challenge and overcome these self-directed ageisms and get inoculated against the rubbish that society tells us about getting old. So we need to have some strategies for challenging and overcoming, these ideas, these beliefs, these attitudes. So one of the way of going about it is reframe things cognitively. Start shifting your self-talk and start challenging stereotypes. That could be as simple as, do you really need to dress like an old person in our view, right? Now, remember, being old and the experiences that we had of seeing old people, is vastly different because there are time frames involved. Right? I sometimes look around and I see somebody in their 70s and, they're dressed in a pair of jeans and a, T-shirt that says, only a surfer knows the feeling. Now, when I was a kid, I would never see someone in their 70s wearing anything like that. Okay? So we need to adapt. We need to grow with it. And sometimes we need to reflect about what it is we're doing with that. So we need to be on top of this whole process, including then how they result in what we feel. Because if my mood is deteriorating, sure as hell I'm going to need some help with that. So reach out for help. Counselling, connecting with others, find role models, all sorts of stuff. Therapy and counselling is a really good way of doing this. You don't have to be crazy or mentally ill to get support. So what I want to do is encourage everyone out there listening to this is begin to challenge your attitudes about age. Are you ageist? We talk a lot about being racist, but we don't really talk a lot about, ageism, especially not amongst us as men. Now, in this process, we also got to be a little bit realistic. Now, one way of really getting behind our supporting ourselves and others in old age is to have social connections, and not just with the same age group. There was this beautiful program on TV some time ago where they filmed young kids going into an aged care facility and the benefits that everyone derived from that. And it wasn't just the elderly in the aged care facility who got a whole bunch of positives out of it, but so did the kids. I mean, we know the positive effect that grandparents have on their grandchildren. Now, some grandchildren don't have the opportunity to interact with their grandparents anymore because they're either too ill, too old, like literally with dementia, or they are just somewhere else, living somewhere else. So social connection is really fundamentally positive. So create opportunities to nurture your relationships, build new ones, engage in activities that promote positive aging. Sport is a good way of doing that. Interest groups, photography, whatever it is, whatever floats your boat. But the key thing that I want to stress is that we need to change our attitude towards aging. And this youth-oriented pseudo-culture that we perpetually are exposed to in the media does not help. Do we really need to spend thousands of dollars on cosmetic surgery to try and look a hell of a lot younger when in fact, most often than not, we just look distorted? That's not us. If I've got some wrinkles, they're a sign that I've lived a rich life and at least I've had the opportunity to get old, which is, in my view and in my wife's view, a privilege. A lot of people don't get that opportunity to go, you know what, I'm getting old, but I'm going down disgracefully because I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to be really engaged with people. I'm going to really look at my health, my fitness, my social connections, my sense of purpose, and what can I contribute? What can I give at this age? One of the things that I find with young kids, which always, touches my heart, is when they're really interested in what were things like when you were young? What did you do? How was the neighbourhood? What were people thinking? Oh, you mean you had black and white TV? I can imagine a TV that's... Oh, and it was a big, huge box. Wow. So, the message in this, folks, is embrace ageing and challenge ageism. That way, we are going to get old, but we're going to do it in a physically and mentally healthier way. But, as with a lot of things, the biggest issue in this is between our ears. It is determined to a large degree by the perception you take of things. Now, on that note, what I want to do is I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And again, I want to challenge you. Challenge whatever ageist attitude you might have, consciously or subconsciously. Because none of us are going to get any younger. Okay? So, until next time, this is me, Gunter, signing off. And if you're really interested in some of my work and you want to get more of it, not just the podcast, I have a non-fiction book out called Making Good Men Great, Surfing in New Masculinity, and a fiction book for all those adventure freaks out there, especially those of you who are in surfing and sailing and all of that, called Mountains of the Sea. Go to my webpage, www.gunterswoboda.com, and check it out. And hopefully this has been worthwhile. And until next time, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.